Here is where I get to set my spirit free. Here is where I find my naturality. Where are we going?
Where are we going? Today we are in the midst of one of the most historical presidential elections. This election has put many at risk, especially the Black community. Today we'll be discussing post-election results as it relates to and affects Black Americans today. Hi, I'm your host, Kyria Moore, and today I have joining me Dr. Tracey Walters of the Department of Africana Studies at Stony Brook University. Hi, Tracey, how are you?
Hi, good morning, Harry. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you for joining me. So today there's a lot of mixed emotions on the election and where we're going as our country. What was your initial reaction to this election?
We often hear that cliche statement, this is an election of a lifetime, and we're hearing that once again. I don't know, for me, it feels real this time. There's so much at stake. First, the pandemic. We are living in unprecedented times, right? And I think for some people are looking for leadership. They are looking for someone who can take scientists seriously. We're looking for an individual who can tell the nation the truth, the hard truth about what we need to do to move forward. So many lives have been lost at this particular point, and it seems as though things will get worse before they become better. So that's one thing. Second, the issue of white supremacy. The current president has sent a number of dog whistles to individuals who are supremacist, who are violent, who seek to further divide the nation. I think people are tired of the rhetoric, and people also, I think, are bracing the kind of racial upheaval that is likely to happen as long as the rhetoric continues. And then the attack on diversity and the work that we do at Stony Brook. Stony Brook takes very seriously diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a scholar who works on issues of race, and as a scholar who is unapologetic about this nation's history, as a scholar who is very concerned about the president's effort to create a curriculum of revisionist history, bringing us back to the efforts of those at the turn of the century with the Confederates, right? It's very troubling indeed. And so these are different times. This election is different than any other. So yeah, that's where we are.
So considering the different ways, like in the past and currently, considering the different ways that voters have been suppressed in the past, how does voter suppression affect the African American community today?
Well, gerrymandering continues, right? So the Civil Rights Act of 1965 ensured that all African Americans had the right to vote, right? And ever since then, on both sides, I should add, both Republicans and Democrats have had their fair share of gerrymandering, right? Kind of redistricting to ensure that a particular party is more likely to get the votes in their favor. But voter oppression is real. There have been so many efforts to suppress the vote of those Black and brown communities. And I think that people recognize that. I think they always recognize it, but this year, given the pandemic, given the attack on the United States Postal Office, people wanted to ensure that their vote counted. Every year, people want to ensure their vote counted. This year, more than ever, it was about standing up and being counted, but ensuring that your vote was counted because it was in jeopardy. All Americans have the right to vote, but Black and brown people consistently have seen this effort to deny them of that right. One example might be in some states they have, as given that there's a disproportionate number of Black men and women who are incarcerated, and once they are released, in some states they have the right to vote. And there are a couple of states that have upheld this, right? So they could be part of the political process. But there have been a number of efforts to intervene, to challenge that, despite the fact that it was a law that was enacted. And so even things such as, denying some the right to vote based on the documentation that's provided that in one county is acceptable, but in another is questionable. Not having enough polls or polls that aren't working. And so this is an ongoing effort to deny individuals the right to participate in the political process, but it's not working this year. As we've seen, people have come out in unprecedented numbers across America for both sides.
Going off that, do you think that the racial injustice that we have seen over the summer with George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, amongst many others, do you think that has motivated Black Americans to vote in this election?
Some. Black people are not a monolith, right? Not all Black people necessarily align themselves with the movement for Black lives. Fundamentally, Black people want the same things as everybody else. Yes, they are concerned with police reform for sure. They acknowledge systematic racism. And there's a real issue with Black and brown men in particular, but definitely women and the LGBTQI community as well, being unfairly targeted and losing their lives at the hand of police officers. So that is paramount. But people are also concerned about good schools. They're also concerned about access to healthcare. The pandemic has shown us the disparities in healthcare, right? The number of individuals who are losing their lives. And there's also prison reform. So yes, the events of this summer, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the list is endless. Walter, I'm so sorry, I can't remember the young man's last name, but the list is endless. Yes, people care about that. And I'm sure there are people who are motivated to go to the polls, but that's one part of a larger picture, I would say, in my opinion.
With this country's history with Black Americans, like because of like slavery and our system of oppression that we faced, why do you think it's so important for Black people to go out and vote, especially during this election?
People died for the right to vote. People died for the right to vote. And so I think for people who are of African heritage in this nation, right, African American, Caribbean American, those from Africa, those from the diaspora, that might not be their particular history, but they are living in America. And what's seen first is that you are a person of African heritage. So for all Black people living in America, it behooves them to vote for their interests, not necessarily to vote for whom I want to see in the office, but to exercise your right to vote. Again, we're not a monolith. I think that it needs to be said that to be Black and Republican is an anomaly, or to be Black and Republican is to question your Blackness or your Black identity. People who are Black and Republican might be voting Republican for a number of issues separate from race. They might be voting due to, their economic circumstances. They might be voting due to their religious beliefs and their pro-life beliefs and their anti-LGBTQI rights. So let's also say that. But I think in general, whether Republican, Democratic, or independent or libertarian, Black people should get out and vote and be counted, right? Because if you are on the other side and LGBTQI rights are important to you as they are to me, if you do care about a woman's right to choose, when we think about funding and Planned Parenthood, and again, going back, linking that to healthcare, it's imperative for the Black community to vote, but to vote with intelligence, not to be driven by emotion, but to really know the issues. And we know that it is Black, primarily Black women, but the African American or the Black community in general that enables Democrats to get into office. And so the community, I think this time around, needs to be much more proactive in ensuring that we hold those elected officials accountable for the promises that they make on the campaign trail. Far too often promises are made and they're not delivered. It's going to be tough. If Joe Biden wins, it's going to be tough. There's so much before him. But, as you know, Ice Cube and others have been working with President Trump on a platinum plan. In my personal opinion, the effort is noble. I get the effort, The short-sightedness, though, is that, to my knowledge, Ice Cube and others did not consult with individuals who've been working on these kinds of initiatives, right? The people who work with the CBC and the grassroots organizations. That was short-sighted, I do believe, because one person can't speak on behalf of the group, and the president therefore also shouldn't take one celebrity's ideas for the future without considering the voices of those in the community, especially those at the grassroots level who know what's happening every day in their communities and who know what's needed in their communities. So to kind of wrap up this question, it's imperative for Black people to vote and to vote in their interest. This year, for some, it happens to be Democratic. For others, it happens to be Republican. But for those who know the history of this nation, it's not until, I think, and I'm not a historian, but there were more Black Republicans than there were Democrats after slavery. The pendulum swung. Someone correct me, but I think probably after like the 1920s, 30s. It just so happens that more Democrats who are Black voted democratically this year. It's imperative that we vote, and we vote in our interests, and that we demand that these elected officials deliver. One final note, though. It is not insignificant that my sorority sister, Kamala Harris, will be the first Black woman to hold the position as vice president. That is remarkable. And right now it's on the back burner because we're just trying to get to, claiming victory. That is a remarkable accomplishment for a woman of color, who also happens to be, I should acknowledge, half Asian, but it's a remarkable accomplishment. So let's not forget that.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for your time and for your input on this discussion. I think it's very important. And thank you again so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Don't turn around, just keep moving forward.